Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, August 2nd, 2019. AEFA, the Alabama Economic Freedom Act. The following article was written by Chuck Bailey. He and his wife Mary Lynn have been heading up the Alabama State FAIRtax organization, and Chuck is on the AFFT Board of Delegates. So here's his article. Yes, getting a tax reform bill passed is like making sausage. In 2015, my wife and I had been FAIRtax volunteers in Alabama for 10 years. At that point in time, we were wondering if the national bill could be helped along to enactment if a couple of states would enact state tax systems modeled on the FAIRtax. The consumption tax word was being spread around the state in meetings with church organizations, civic clubs, tea parties, political clubs, actually anywhere people would invite us to tell our story. As it happens, at the same time, Alabama State House Representative Mike Holmes was offering his bold tax reform for Alabama as a conservative alternative to previously released plans. His proposal would have required a constitutional amendment and would include repealing the state income tax. In return, the state sales tax would be expanded to include services, increased from 4% to 6.5%, and most exemptions would be removed, plus there would be some other additional features. After some thought, we realized that Representative Holmes was on a similar path trying to accomplish the same result that we were at Alabama FAIRtax, but he didn't have the research and development available that we already had. So, in the summer of 2016, a meeting was conducted with him and other legislators, and it was determined that our efforts should be combined to accomplish our mutual goal of totally replacing the current income sales tax system with a single-rate consumption tax. It was decided that the FAIRtax plan was the best model to use, and efforts began to define a bill to determine a revenue-neutral single-rate consumption tax system for Alabama. In parallel at the same time, Georgians for Fair Taxation had their bill written by the co-author of the national bill and had a rate study conducted by the Beacon Hill Institute. Now that's the same group who defined the national rate using their certified computable general equilibrium model to accomplish dynamic tax studies. We followed suit and acquired the services of both, receiving the draft consumption tax rate study in May of 2016 and the draft bill in December 2016. Legislative activity began in February of 2017, but due to other hot-button issues in 2017 and 2018, our activity was rescheduled for 2019. After an update to the bill and rate studies in 2019, introduction was once again delayed due to the crowded legislative schedule. At last Sunday's Mass, we were reminded, if you ask, you shall receive. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and the door will be opened unto you. For prayers to be answered, you must be persistent in prayer, and we were very persistent. In the latter part of this year's legislative session, the bill and rate study cleared the Legislative Services Agency, but it was too late to introduce it. Everything was set at the end of the session, so to be ready for next year, Representative Holmes pre-filed the bill on June 4th as the Alabama Economic Freedom Act, AEFA, and it was assigned bill number HB4. Since the act abolishes the current income and sales tax laws, a constitutional amendment repealing applicable sections of the Alabama Code of 1975 must be voted into law by Alabama voters. The constitutional amendment was assigned bill number HB3. The plan is to move HB4 through to enactment early in the legislative session next year so HB3 can be on the ballot next fall. Yep, we're still praying. So, what do we get when the AEFA is passed next spring? Well, the first thing to happen is that the old tax law is repealed and replaced with a single-rate consumption tax only on new goods and services purchased at retail sale for personal use only. Individuals no longer have to waste their limited and therefore precious time on collecting receipts, filling out complicated forms, and reporting income to the state. Corporations no longer have to waste time collecting receipts, filling out complicated forms, and reporting their income to the state either. There are no more business-to-business taxes, since taxes on labor and all corporate income taxes are eliminated. The tax base more than doubles to afford a lower revenue-neutral consumption tax rate. Enforcement drastically shrinks from over 2,300,000 income tax filers to about 60,000 retailers. The income tax division is eliminated within 3 years, and all income tax documentation is destroyed. Tax compliance costs will plummet. The new system is simple, transparent, efficient, and fair, as retailers collect the tax only at the point of retail sale, and they are reimbursed to do so. Like the national bill, the AEFA has a prebate based on the HHS poverty guidelines. Like the national bill, the prebate is applied by family size, not income. The single rate consumption tax is 8.03%, but that's offset by the prebate to result in a lower overall cost to all eligible Alabama residents, especially lower wealth individuals. Spending at the poverty level is tax-free. Spending at twice the poverty level is effectively a 4% rate, the current sales tax rate. Spending has to be in the millions of dollars for any family size before paying the full 8.03% rate. As with the national bill, the prebate is a cornerstone of fairness built into the system. So far, we've had very good support from legislators, with several of them contributing funds to pay for the writing of the bill and conducting the rate study. As alluded to earlier, this effort is privately funded and constituent supported by Alabama FAIRtax volunteers. All bill writing and studies have been funded by volunteer donors from Alabama, including the legislators. Finally, as with the national FAIRtax effort, the Alabama Economic Freedom Act has experienced the normal pushback from individuals who really haven't studied the bill or who haven't gone through the simple prebate process to see how it actually works. Some typical reactions include, that won't ever happen, or, oh my gosh, you're going to add 8.03% to the tax we're already paying now? Or, I live in a county that has a local tax lower than those around me. I'll be negatively impacted by the AEFA. Now, they don't actually know what's going on among the legislators or how many have already said they'll vote for the bill in the House and Senate, nor do they know the positive reception among the administration. As we approach next year's legislative session in the spring, most will find out. And, as discussed above, individuals and families will have to spend upwards of 128 times their associated poverty level before they'll actually be paying the full 8.03% rate on their discretionary spending. The prebate overrides the local tax differential argument. If every legal Alabaman paying the tax and receiving the prebate purchases a new product or service, their out-of-pocket taxes will be less because AEFA abolishes the current costly tax system. Compliance costs are significantly reduced, and the tax base is broadened to over twice the current level. The AEFA is not complicated. The current system is. Now, you just can't make paying taxes any simpler than you buy a new product, you pay the tax, and you're done with paying your Alabama taxes until you purchase again. You buy a service, you pay the tax. Done. The retailer collects the tax, remits it to the state, literally on a single-page form, and is reimbursed for his collection efforts. The AEFA is not complicated. To sum up, the Alabama Economic Freedom Act has been pre-filed and assigned to committee in the Alabama House. A significant number of representatives already support the bill. There's also a Senate sponsor who has the support of other senators. It's defined to totally repeal the current state income tax, the state sales tax, all city and county sales taxes, and replace it all with a single-rate consumption tax. Representative Holmes is leading the effort to pass HB 4 through the House early in next year's legislative session to allow time for passage in the Senate, signing into law by the governor, and a vote on the associated constitutional amendment HB 3, all of this in time for next year's national general election. Voting to change the Constitution to allow the AEFA would allow the switch to the consumption tax on January 1st, 2021. Yep. Getting a true tax reform bill passed in the state legislature is like making sausage. It takes a lot of time, work, and prayer. And yes, we're still praying. In conclusion, the Alabama Economic Freedom Act will demonstrate to everyone how implementing the fair tax at the state level will help Alabama, and the fact that it's gaining traction sends waves of anxiety to the swamp in D.C. How could these upstarts in Alabama actually threaten us? Don't they understand that we know best? Alabama is demonstrating that we the people can make the correct choice. The Alabama and the national fair tax are going to help everyone.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at fairtax.org or bigsolution.org.